All right. So, I mentioned the core team met last week to kind of talk through everything that we have due between now and the end of September. So, if you're not familiar with the Recce grant, I know it's been a while since we talked some of the details. The project is broken into 3 budget periods. So the way DOE did the Recce projects is you could do up to 18 months of work, and at which point there is a go, no go decision. And so that's what those budget periods represent is here's 18 months. Because of the delay with our requested extension, the first budget period would actually turn out to be 24 months. And then the remaining 2 would be 18. And so what we're really focused on right now is what do we have due by the end of the budget period, and making sure that we're on track so that when we get to that go, no go, we haven't, despite all the uncertainty, given any cause for DOE to say, you haven't met performance and we're not continuing the grant. So that's really the approach that we're taking. So there's a couple of deliverables from last quarter, which was the last 3 months of last year. So October, November, December, that we'll hit on. And then additional, I believe it's 10 deliverables that we have due by September. So really just high level. The community engagement plan that you guys saw late last year, it was determined it was best not to submit that because we were in transition with the teaming partner. So don't worry about reviewing that draft. We are going to be revising it and submitting it with this quarter, which ends in March. Because of the lack of communication with Department of Energy, we've not been able to get confirmation on that replacement teaming partner, SDR, Southwest Decision Resources. You guys met them at the last steering committee meeting. So in order to, as I keep referring to it, check the box, Tucson's going to take the lead. USDN is offering some assistance, and we're just going to tackle getting a basic draft engagement plan done so that we have that to submit. The project website was submitted with the last quarter. However, it is being refined. It hasn't been launched publicly. We've given it to Department of Energy just to satisfy that deliverable. Jonathan and team have been doing some great work. There is a new version of it. We're not going to look at it quite today, but that's being refined for hopefully getting that out publicly very, very, very soon. So, and it looks really nice, guys. So I'm looking forward to us getting it kind of a little more tweaked and being able to share that. Then moving forward, we've got 12 plus virtual trainings on the IECC that'll be provided by International Code Council, ICC. So right now we're just waiting. Because of all the uncertainty and the lack of communication, we've had to push that training out just a little bit. So in the process of revising that schedule and getting a flyer. So hopefully that'll all get pinned down and formally announced very shortly and have those starting very soon. By the end of this quarter, we also have to have at least 2 community-based organizations that are under contract. We have funding for 4, and these community-based organizations were really intended to be kind of the more on-the-ground implementers for the community engagement piece of this under the kind of support and coordination of the kind of higher level teaming partner, which we're hoping will be SDR. And So the approach we're taking here in order to satisfy this is we really want to, what we committed to in the grant application is using community-based organizations that had signed letters of commitment. And we're also really trying to focus on organizations that have strong ties with the partner jurisdictions, really good connections with our communities, and make sure we've got geographic representation. We are going to be renaming them to Community Engagement Partners, or CEPAs, because I have heard from so many of you that CBO also stands for Chief Building Official. So in order just to kind of get that kind of confusion out of the way, we're going to call them CEPAs. SERI, Sonora Environmental Research Institute, is based out of here in Tucson, and they have been for decades a long time amazing partner with the city. Unlimited Potential was originally recommended as a partner for this project by City of Tempe, City of Mesa. They've worked with, I think, all of the partner organization, the partner jurisdictions from the Phoenix metro area, and do really, really amazing work. Both organizations are very familiar with federal grants and are very willing to be partners despite the uncertainty, despite not even being completely sure if we'll keep the grant. So we're going to move forward with them in the short term. And then I've had conversations with Flagstaff and Coconino County. We're looking for a partner that they're comfortable with and they're familiar with from up in the northern region. And then also I had conversations with the sustainability director in Albuquerque to try to find one that's got, good roots and partnerships over there. So we're moving forward, but we're really trying to make it, really place-based and have groups that have, those really strong connections with the jurisdictions. The next deliverable, and this one's due, so this is all what we have to get done by June. The the surveys that Illume did, those are complete. The next phase will be interviews. Those will be starting in March. And they've already started the preliminary analysis. And remember, this is really trying to capture like the state of energy code implementation in the region, identify barriers, challenges to adoption and implementation of energy codes, resource needs to kind of help us maybe tweak the resources we're providing, particularly on the implementation side, but just also help elevate the understanding of what the needs are and what could be done collectively to make it easier for energy codes to be adopted. They're looking to maybe present those draft results to you all in June. I'm not going to belabor this too much more. So between now and September, there will be also another phase of IECC training that will be in person. That'll be aimed specifically at building departments in the region. We're looking at maybe having it September, giving ourselves time to really get those set up. And then also ASBO does an October training, and so there's maybe an opportunity for some synergies there. We do have the now 3 advisory committees. The Equity Advisory Panel, we're recognizing we may have to rename at a minimum. We may have to discontinue. So that's probably our biggest area of uncertainty, but that would be driven by DOE themselves. So at this point, we still plan to meet with them on March 25th. That's the next meeting. But because of this uncertainty, there's also uncertainty with, getting SDR approved. There's a little bit of uncertainty with Quadro and being able to, get timely reimbursements. Also, Shay just had a baby last week, so she's on maternity leave. But she and I are gonna meet in early March and figure out if we can, or what our game plan is for trying to keep the EAP on track, regardless of the uncertainty. Then we've got the technical advisory group. There's a kind of smaller group that NBI is calling the WAG, the writing advisory group. So the technical is really kind of the big picture, what needs to be in the code. The WAG is really like, what are those draft provisions look like. Those are both moving ahead, full steam ahead. As Tristan said, NBI is like fully committed here. We do have to do 3 or more community engagement sessions. Hopefully we'll have those community engagement partners and they can play a key role, but we may end up reaching out to the jurisdictions who are partners and looking for creative ways to do these virtually and get those done. Sweeps working on career marketing messages. They're completely on track with that. And then really quickly, the final 3 are really kind of the capstones for this phase and scoping out the resilience code and what in the SOPO is called program packages. So the presentation that Tristan is going to do today is hopefully going to show you just how much progress they're making in scoping that out and starting to get input from folks. We're also working on a summary document that's trying to capture all the different advisory committee input we've received so far. So we can share that with you hopefully shortly. And then based on the surveys and interviews, there's going to be an assessment report. We still need to determine what to include. So addition to the surveys and interviews, looking at maybe capturing existing resources in there, connecting with what the state energy offices are doing. And then the final piece is the implementation guide framework. So starting to get a handle on what those implementation resources need to be and will look like. Still need to have discussions again about what is included in this framework. And Julia's here. I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to meet the meeting. So Julia started this week and she's going to have a really, really key role in getting this done. So this is what we've got to get done by September. And we, as the core team, feel like we're on track to do it, feel pretty comfortable. But what that's going to mean, there's going to be a lot of things coming your way at these steering committee meetings through the rest of the budget period. This is completely tentative. In fact, I haven't talked to some of you as core team members about where you want to plug in here, but probably in March, coming back to you with community engagement plan. We're going to have like scopes of the resilience codes and roadmap, talking about the community engagement sessions, like all these things that I just went through. We will need input from this group. So this just gives you a high level of there's going to be some meaty stuff coming your way. But I think it's going to be really exciting. And then hopefully in September, we can really just have a positive closeout, think about our next steps, and hopefully keep moving with this work. So that's kind of where we're at. And we will keep you all updated. But as we've said, everyone here is committed to moving forward and just keeping this going until somebody makes us not. And then, as Tristan said, we're looking for options to do it anyway. So, but I want to stop there. Tristan, I'm assuming you're going to want to share your screen to talk about the resilience code.
Yes, please.
So I will stop sharing. And the floor is yours.
Alrighty, awesome. So we have been, I guess before I start sharing, we've been working with all of the information that we've got from the team and from the tags, brainstorming and putting ideas for how to think about and how to structure the code and the elements of resilience that are included. And we've started putting that down into a big kind of brainstorming platform, a Miro board that is just a visual a visual tool and helpful for organization. We started at the highest level with the building hazard classification, and are looking at hazard categories that are in the region. And within each of those, we are looking at code measure outcomes. And a code measure outcome is bigger than a code measure, smaller than, it doesn't address all of a hazard category, but it addresses an element of that. And so looking at extreme heat, for example, there's heat island mitigation, there's passive survivability, there's um, efficient cooling systems, there's passive cooling. All of those would be a code measure outcome. And within each code measure outcome, we have a number of code measures. And uh, the idea with a code measure outcome is that it achieves some measurable improvement in one or more metrics. So in the case of heat island mitigation, um, uh, that contributes to a lower urban heat island index. For passive survivability, that contributes to reduced peak heating and cooling loads, reduced heating and cooling demand over the course of the year. And so we don't necessarily have the infrastructure and budget to do modeling of all of these code measures for all of the building types and all of the climate zones and things like that. But we're trying to develop this in a way that these things could be measured, they could be quantified. So kind of teeing up potential future phases of work and effort that would build on this resilience code. So um, just looking at extreme heat, we have four code measure outcomes. We have heat island mitigation, we have passive survivability, we have natural ventilation and night cooling, and we have active survivability. And within each of these, we start to draft the code measures that are uh, nested within that. Um, and so taking heat island mitigation, we have cool roof requirements, we have cool hardscape requirements, external shading, vegetation, and those are, the titles of those code measures. And within those, we would, the plan is to create a code measure sheet where we actually start to uh, pull from precedent in codes, in standards, and certification programs, things like that, for those requirements, and start to look at what is appropriate for our climate and our region and this resilience code, and then we would start to pull that in and draft the actual proposed code changes. And some of these may end up getting broken out into additional granularity. And so, right, with cool hardscapes, there are different hardscapes on sites. For cool roof requirements, vegetated roofs may fall into that, or it may fall into increased site vegetation. And so this isn't capturing the full level of granularity, but it's starting to break down how we're structuring the code, working from building hazard classifications, applicable code measure outcomes, and then the individual code measures that contribute to that. And so we've started to do this for most of the major uh, hazards in the region, and um, are going through previous work with the tag and our other work with resilience, and really trying to put as much stuff down as we can, and to work with and to start drawing, um, so we can start drawing on where does material for this already exist. And the next phase of work will be looking at that to figure out where we can pull from for the actual code stringencies, and figuring out how we put that into the code where it's appropriate and things like that. Um, and so this is ultimately going to land in a spreadsheet that categorizes this in a little bit more detail. So it'll list where this lives in the code, precedent locations, where we can draw on where there's already been research and work developing code measures or construction requirements, building requirements around these code measures, and ultimately we will be drafting actual code measure sheets that list what that exact language is going to look like. One of the so right, we've got this for most major building categories. Um, One of the things that we're starting to think about is how, right, like at the most simple level, this goes into an appendix document that has each hazard classification, all of the code measure outcomes, and all of the measures. That's a really big document. It's not applicable to every climate zone. It's not applicable to every jurisdiction. Um, and so one of the things that we need to figure out how to do is how this code becomes adaptable and adjustable and customizable for different jurisdictions with different hazard profiles, different political appetites, different priorities around what buildings need to have different levels of resilience. And so um, one way that we've thought about doing this is is linking each of the hazard categories to some resource for risk assessment. Um, the FEMA National Risk Index is one really great resource for this because it has information at the county level on most of our major hazard classifications. So if we're looking at heat wave, we can see what counties have different degrees of risk. And um, we can, we were playing around with a table that that can take the national risk index rating ranging from no expected annual loss to very high annual loss, and we can start to plug in the code county weighting factor, which would basically be a multiplier that is telling you how many of the code measures in each code measure outcome bundle you need to comply with. And so it's linking the stringency of the code to the local or regional risk level. Um, and and then this table is also, right, the way that this is structured now is we would have one of these tables for each building occupancy classification. And so we could go through and customize this based on different building types, right? Say we want our schools to be really resilient, even if the national risk index only shows a moderate risk category, right? And vice versa, you could say actually none of this stuff needs to apply to warehouses. They don't need to comply with anything because we don't care. This isn't finalized. This is just kind of one early brainstorming thing that we're thinking about in terms of how we can turn a really big, complicated, and wide-ranging code touching a whole lot of hazard classifications into something that can be more easily adapted to local priorities and local conditions across a range of climate zones. So I'll pause there for a second and see if folks have any questions on that.
Jonathan, you look like you're thinking hard.
No questions, though.
Yeah, that's fine. We've it's a lot to work with right now, and so we're trying to just continue like getting a lot of this on paper so we can start to really pull in actual code measures and think about where and how those apply. Some of our next steps here will be taking this from the kind of visual board, getting that into a spreadsheet in a more manageable, like distributable and manageable format so that we can start to get input on priorities around code measures, get input on what is missing, what's unnecessary, things like that, and so that we can understand everyone's priorities and thoughts on how we move forward structuring this and how and where different requirements apply.
I think what's really nice about it too, just seeing it is, we have so many people working in this whole committee with the TAG, the AP, it really helps focus people's ideas and expertise in the right direction. I know with so many people, it can be hard to, you know, all come together in the same direction or all be able to when we have these points and everything broken out, we can really focus in on one area, grab the right expertise and get people moving. So it really puts a lot of takes the direction and moves it like more concise and gets us all on the same page. So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. We can have folks who specialize in or have a lot of experience with wildfire mitigation and or riverine flooding, heat waves, things like that, focus on their areas of expertise or certain building applicability, construction types, things like that. We're trying to get it in a way that we can have some really targeted engagement from everyone and have that be really productive. So yeah, thanks, Greg.
There aren't any questions. I was thinking that I could maybe screen share for a second here. And I wanted to actually just pull back up the slides from our October meeting. Did I pick the right one? Nope. So many windows open, it's going to be hard to find the right slide here. Sorry. 2024, October 2024, here it is. I feel like we've come a long way since October, even with some of the bumps along the way. So if you remember, we said that this was going to be the sort of 3-step process that we were going to be taking to try to develop the code over I guess, the next however many months are between now and September, end of September, the end of our first budget period for the project. So we were looking to reach consensus on the priority needs and challenges, and this is really where we're using the TAG and the AP, uncovering key topics. We've worked with a lot of you to talk about the framework, and I think we've really, we're still continuing the conversation, but I think the idea of an appendix or a set of amendments that can be attached to the IRC and IBC is where we landed. At least was the best option for a first draft. And so we'll identify existing code language and then draft new code language where we find some lacking. So we're working through the straw man proposal here, and I think we're still working on, I think, every element that we outlined that was involved in a straw man proposal back in October. I think we've definitely made some progress identifying some of the key regional challenges and the key topics for code development that we identified last October. So some of the regional challenges, we're talking about those challenges in 3 different buckets: climate resilience, energy use, and building sustainability. And we also had some key topics. So from the TAG and the AP, we heard interest in what the key hazards were for the region, as well as some of the key topics to focus in on the code. So energy efficiency, renewables, passive cooling strategies. There's some interest in evaluating climate zones and projected weather data. And there's also an interest in traditional building methods, right? We've heard that from the EAP. So I feel like we've come a long way, and I think maybe Tristan, if you wanted to wrap up looking at the FEMA map and explaining why we'd turn to that as a basis for trying to understand some of the risk categories, or how we were thinking about organizing the hazards along building occupancies and climate zones. Oh, you're on mute.
Great, thank you. Sorry. I was going to say one very complicated and hard way to think about how to apply a code this broad that covers a pretty diverse range of of space geographically, and also like in terms of climate zones, is we have everything, and different jurisdictions, different states decide what applies to them. That's a very cumbersome process, and it's really hard to know what should apply, what shouldn't, and to do that process. So we were trying to find a way that we can leverage existing analysis and work to think of when and to what degree different requirements should apply. And the FEMA National Risk Index already has this for a whole lot of categories, right? They have cold wave, they have heat wave, they have coastal flooding, riverine flooding, drought, earthquake, strong wind, tornado, wildfire, and those risks don't cut across, or they do cut across climate zones, right? And so it takes some of the it takes away some of the limitations of applying code requirements strictly based on climate zone, because one, our climate is changing, so those climate zones are sometimes more or less representative that they used to be, but also hazards don't follow cleanly along climate zone boundaries. And so by leveraging an external and existing resource like this that has a lot of science and work backing it up, we can integrate a framework for increasing stringency of requirements based on level of risk. So it lends legitimacy to when and why we're and how we're justifying more stringent requirements in some places than others, but it's also a tool for policymakers and code officials and people to understand a benchmark for where requirements should be considered and are appropriate, and where they're less appropriate. So that's how we've come to thinking about things in this way. And this is not firm, but it's one framework that we're thinking about for how we can provide some structure to like have a unified code that can be customizable fairly easily, and also it can change over time as areas decide actually we want to do more with this, or as hazards change. You can change what requirements apply without reworking the base code structure, and similarly you can change the base code language structure without without impacting what applies to your area, right? So we can change and modify and improve the base code and not necessarily screw up the way that jurisdictions are using it currently. So it's just some of the intent behind the
Tristan,
thinking here.
I think you had a question from Clayton.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. I can't see hands when I'm sharing, so.
Yeah, thank you. It was more of a comment than a question. First, just want to support this methodology. Really appreciate having a strong resource that we can rely on for that level of expertise, such as FEMA, even though FEMA isn't always held in the greatest of light, depending on who you're talking to. But one other advantage that I see is this appears to be all broken down per county. And the political challenge of getting a regulation implemented in any specific region, is regionally based. So there's some advantage there as well.
Yeah, thanks. And we're certainly open that FEMA is one of the things that at first glance makes sense, right? But I think it would be helpful to understand where other resources exist that we could suggest as ways to evaluate local or regional risk, but outside of FEMA.
One other question: with all of the websites that we're seeing go dark, is there any concern that we might lose access to this information? And or is there some way that we could,
Yeah.
retain a snapshot of it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is there is concern. I mean, FEMA has been called out specifically by the new administration, so I think there's nothing's off the table. I personally did download all of all of the data for the National Risk Index at the county level for all of these categories because I was also concerned about that. I don't think that's a long-term fix or substitution for having some like publicly accessible database and resource like this, but I did at least take that short-term contingency so we could, if we wanted to use this as a resource and it disappeared, we would have access to that at the data level.
Yeah, Clayton, the EPA's EJ screening tool is already removed. And there is, I think it's a nonprofit, some kind of NGO, the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative, that is sort of, they're capturing the tools and archiving them and posting them online. So we've already seen one important tool for some of this work that I think the EJ screening tool worked by Census Tract. But yeah, keeping our eye on it.
Other questions or thoughts for Tristan and Kevin? Or anything from the earlier presentation on kind of grant and project status that folks want to come back to? Kind of rush through that because I wanted to make sure Tristan had enough time to run through their thinking. Nina put in the chat, it looks like a great approach to her.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? What about, Tristan, you mentioned, and I think Clayton kind of referenced it too, potentially other sources of data. I can think of some things at the local level that are available, which would get around the, what may happen to the federal data sources. But I think the challenges, and Clayton, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like I'm thinking about our heat vulnerability data, but that's neighborhood level. And that seems to be too granular for trying to structure a code like this.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done too much thinking for like what other appropriate external resources there might be, but I think at a high level we're trying to structure this in a way that enacting jurisdictions could decide to replace the entirely the FEMA risk index approach or aspects of that with resources that they think are better, or they could ignore that entirely and assign the weighting factor based on local priorities, right? If you think it's really important for a school to have most or all of these resilience measures because they should act as resilience centers in XYZ, you can override that. You could take the table for educational occupancies and max out all the requirements, right? And just say you have to do all of this stuff, or say you have to do all of this stuff for heat waves and all of this stuff for cold waves and all of this stuff for high wind and nothing else, right? So this isn't necessarily a prescriptive approach. It's just one approach for weighting this in the absence of other priorities or approaches.
Well, I know I'm not a building code expert, but I was personally really excited when Tristan shared this a little over a week ago with me, and was really excited to have this opportunity for him to share it with you all, because I think, a lot of stuff has been happening almost behind the scenes a little bit. And this is really, I think, a nice opportunity for you all to see just the incredible amount of work and thinking that's going into this, and to see it on paper like that, and to see, you know, the structure forming, I think is really exciting. And it shows a lot about how much progress we really, as a group, have made. So Tristan, do you have any additional thoughts on any kind of, maybe not here at this meeting, but moving forward, any kind of input or thoughts or feedback you would like from this group, and how?
Yeah, I'll be circulating a sign up form so people can sign up to draft the hazard categories for us. No, I'm just kidding. But we're going to think about how we can get this into a form to solicit feedback and get everyone's thoughts in like an organized way. And I think that's open for as much or little as folks want to engage with. If there's a hazard category or a building science approach or something that you know a lot about and are interested in, we would love to leverage that interest and knowledge. So we're right now, it's kind of chaotic how it's organized. So trying to get that into a workable form to distribute to folks and get feedback. So, but if you have any questions or thoughts in the meantime that you don't want to bring up now, or want to have a dedicated call or ask anything, we're an open door. So we'd love to chat with you and get more input.
Well, anything else for the good of the order? Any other questions, any concerns about anything we've talked about today? Any questions from our new folks? Just a little clarification that you feel would be helpful? Well, looks like we're gonna, oh, Erin?
Oh, I was just gonna say nothing from me. I learned a lot listening in today. Thank you all.
Great. Well, in that case, looks like we'll be able to give folks a few minutes back in their day. Covered a lot of ground, but very efficiently. Thank you, Tristan. And, you know, we, as Kevin said earlier, Tristan said earlier, we will keep you as informed as we can, as we learn things, as we know things. But I just want to reiterate that, you know, the team's committed to moving forward. My leadership at Tucson are absolutely behind us staying heavily involved and helping kind of bridge some of the gaps as they arise. And so we're gonna keep this going. And as always, thank you all for everything you're doing to make this a really, really amazing project. So.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you all. Good to see you. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.